Buenas tardes, good afternoon, and welcome to another Fintech Nexus webinar. We are delighted today to have some esteemed guests with us to talk about balancing fraud prevention and customer experience. We are going to get into quite a bit of detail here. You're going to get some practical advice on how companies are actually doing this in the field, and you're going to learn a lot. So with that, let's do introductions. My name is Peter Renton. I am the chairman and co-founder of Fintech Nexus, and I'm going to be your host for the next almost 60 minutes. Let's just go do a round of brief introductions with everybody here. Sahari, why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everybody. I am Sahari Cabello. I am VP of Credit Risk and Fraud Prevention in Quesky since 5 years ago. And well, I have about 20 years experience in the Mexican financial system. Thank you for this space.
Okay. Tarek?
Sure. Tarek Osman, half Mexican, half Palestinian, been in the fraud prevention business for 10 years, in the financial business probably 15. All the good stuff. I'm here representing Telesign, solution engineering and consulting.
Okay, and also I should say thank you to Telesign for sponsoring this webinar.
Anytime.
Okay, Javier.
Thanks, Peter. Nice to see you, everyone. My name is Javier. I'm CMO of Cubo Financiero. We are a SOFIPO, which is our banking license. That's how it's called in Mexico, specialized in personal loans and also offering fixed-term investments and savings. We now serve a little over 170,000 customers through our app and our website. And I'm delighted and excited to be here with you.
Okay, so let's get started. So before we get started, let me just explain. This is obviously a Zoom webinar. You have a Q&A button down the bottom of your screen there. Feel free to hit that anytime and ask a question. We will try and get to all of the questions before the webinar is out. So just feel free anytime you can hit that button and ask a question. Okay, so let's kick it off. I want to talk about the loan products you have and the types of borrowers you work with. And Sahari, why don't you kick us off on that?
Yes, thank you. Well, in Quesky, we have two main products, lending products. The one is a personal loan. It is a short-term loan of up to 3 months. This is a B2C product. And also we have a BNPL, is a buy now, pay later product. This is really a payment method that is available at the checkout with all those merchants that we have this integrated Quesky Pay. And well, in this product, Quesky also make the finance of the purchase through an installment loan. And we have bi-weekly payments. It's a very nice product. We have available in e-commerce and in-store merchants. In both cases, Quesky Pay and Quesky Cash, as we call the personal loan, are available up to $1,300. That is the maximum credit limit. And well, we are open, talking about the customers, we are open to a large range of customers. As I was saying, this is a B2C. So we go for both banked or non-banked users. And also we treat with prior or not prior credit history. All the process is digital. So maybe the main or the important point here is that customers has to have some idea or may own a personal digital device.
Okay, got it. Okay. Javier, what about you? Tell us a little bit about your borrowers and the details of your loan products.
Sure, Peter. We cater to people that are looking for a personal loan. About 1/3 of our borrowers are entrepreneurs. They have a small business, probably a small coffee shop or store. They use their personal loan for working capital most of the time. We have, for example, many entrepreneurs that sell merchandise, catalog merchandise. So they need the money to buy ahead, the seasonal merchandise, or buy a new supplier that they may be selling in their store. Then another third of our borrowers are independent professionals like architects, designers, doctors, dentists, and they need the loan to buy equipment, for example, buy an additional fridge, buy a new plotter, right, for architects or designers. So we have that third of our borrowers, and the last third of them are home families that need the loan to tackle an emergency, right? Something they were not expecting, to fix up a car, to pay for a doctor's or medical expenses, or maybe equip their young daughters or sons with a new laptop for school, right? So or making a family trip, right? So these are kind of the profiles of our borrowers. We take to heart that each one of them have special needs for how we disburse the loan, what are the frequency of payments, obviously how well they can use our app or our website, and we try to take this profiling of our borrowers very seriously and try to communicate in an easy and clear way on what are the terms of our loans and how they can use and better get value from Cubo Financiero.
And what's the loan sizes that you're working with?
It's our average is about 15,000 pesos, which is $750 to $800.
Right. Okay. Okay, great. And Tarek, moving to you, why don't you tell us a little bit about the types of companies that you're working with throughout Latin America?
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit vast. We work with e-commerce, fintechs, banks. So basically anywhere we see there is onboarding going, that's where we are in. So we get to help these companies out by moving from the physical world to the digital world in their identity, touching the identity, verifying their phone number, their behavior, and how this works. And then, of course, we want to do it in the best way, right? Not to interfere with the user experience.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into it. Let's start talking about fraud. What kinds of fraud schemes are you seeing today, Sahari?
Yes, well, I can say that the main ones are definitely the identity theft. It can be either from specific users or in a more sophisticated way using bots. So we have, it is mainly on e-commerce, because some attacks that suddenly happens and the fraudsters have all the information or most of the information and make these trials. Also, we have collusion. Collusion is observed mainly on in-store channels because it is something more social that sometimes fraudsters are colluded with someone from internal in the merchant when they are operating. And of course, we always have the first-party fraud. The first-party fraud where the user tries to make some cheating and use false information, sometimes it is the fraudster that is trying to analyze how the system and how all the business operates in a first instance, and then to replicate that formula with other persons. So I think that these are like the three main ones that we're facing right now.
Okay. Javier, do you have a similar situation, or what types of fraud are you seeing?
It's very similar, Peter. Identity theft is definitely the one that is more worrisome, not because of the because there's a third party that is affected, but also because it's becoming more sophisticated in those terms, right? Each day is a little harder to spot and prevent, and that's where the use of technology definitely needs to come into place. We don't we don't do e-commerce like Quesky, so we don't have the as evident the one of collusion, but definitely identity theft is the one that we focus on to prevent, and also to spot right away new patterns and new ways of doing it, and improved ways of doing it, right?
Right.
That's the one.
Well, we're gonna talk about all the ways to prevent it in a little bit, but before we do, Tarek, wanted to sort of get your kind of overview of the types of fraud you're seeing. Is this particularly when it comes to, you know, fintechs and banks? Are there other cases that other than what's been mentioned here?
Oh, definitely. They all revolve around this. They're around the same thing, like synthetic fraud. Most of it information could be real, or it's just mixed up with different names. So it could be, I am Javier Abello, and I have Peter's random phone number and email of Tarek. But everything exists, is real. It's just a different people's information playing in together. So that's part of it. But yeah, identity theft is always causing issues there.
Right.
But that's why we're here to help.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So let's talk about preventing fraud now. And Sahari, what are some of the ways you're currently doing that today? What are you focused on to prevent fraud?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, we have different dimensions and different moments. So talking about the assessment, when the customer comes and we make some assessment of their application or the onboarding, we look for the personal information, the digital information, to identify if it really exists, as Tarek was saying, because maybe it even doesn't exist. Also, we look if those are connected and regards to a real person. Well, it is not a created person, a fake person. And later, we look to identify the risk level, because we are getting different information either from the same user and from other partners that provide us some data, and even from our internal system, such that we can identify that high risk in terms of if that customer or that user is related with some fraud cases, the different ones that we have mentioned before. So that happens during the evaluation. So we use this data to, as I was saying, to verify that it is a real person that belongs to the same person. We run models, machine learning models, to be in a very sophisticated way this risk level assessment. And also at the end, we make this authentication or verification of the identity of that person, because maybe everything is real, but it is not the real person who is making this process. So all this happened during the assessment. Besides, it is not the only dimension that we look at. We also are making all the time this investigation and reviews, such that we can identify how effective are our tools that we are using, and also if there are some new patterns, because all the time we are finding new patterns and new ways of working. So with this information, we use it not only for us, I mean, not only for making and optimizing and iterating on our models and our policies and all the approval criteria, but also we share some information with some partners, such that with that feedback, all the system can keep improving. We have also like a third dimension that is a kind of innovation. We are looking for always new tools, analyzing information, analyzing new data sources, such that we can complete these programs and make it to progress and evolve as fast as possible as the fraudsters are making, because it's so much ingenious in the Mexican market. So it's funny, it's interesting, but it's very demanding to be, and we have to be very fast.
Yeah, it's not just happening in the Mexican market either. It's every country in the world, I think. Javier, when we chatted last week, you talked about 3 keys to preventing fraud that you sort of isolated. Why don't you share that with the audience?
Sure, of course. These 3 keys or strategies to prevent fraud are to us are very important. The first one is to create awareness of fraud schemes, the way that fraudsters operate. We fortunately have a very large community, not only our customers, but people that follow us on social networks or read our blog. We have hundreds of thousands of visits every month in our blog, and that is those are very effective means to create awareness of what the fraudsters are doing in terms of, stealing someone's identity and being aware that there are very simple steps to make sure that the entity, financial or commercial or e-commerce entity that you're dealing with online is what they claim to be, right? And also the profiles of social media, which are, very simple to create, are, every day we spot fake social media profiles, either that are trying to pretend to be Kubo or pretend to be someone else, right? That will help you get a loan approved, for example, right? And so this is very simple to solve, but you need to make a very consistent and effective effort on educating, our users and people who will never be our users, but may be victims of identity theft, right? So it's the first one is create awareness. The second one is use our methodology and technology to prevent fraud within our ecosystem, right? And we have many layers in which this is implemented in Kubo. We have identity verification. We have multi-factor authentication to access the website for the first time or access our app. We have behavioral analytics on what people are doing within our ecosystem. Behavioral analytics is one of the main strategies that I think technology is helping a lot to prevent fraud. We also use machine learning, as Sahari was also mentioning, the use in Quesky, geolocation, risk scoring, right? And this risk scoring is also done by channel or how we acquire customers. There are channels that are more, well, they have a higher percentage of fraud and other channels that have a lower percentage. And well, all these ways and methodology to prevent fraud are the second key, right, to do it. And the third key is how do you go after people that have committed fraud, right? What is the collaboration with the authorities that we try to create links with the authorities and with other associations, for example, the Association of Sofipos in Mexico, or work collaboratively with the authorities to create understanding and knowledge, a knowledge database on the different fraud schemes that we are seeing in the market. Sometimes we will be the first ones to raise a flag and say, this is happening to us. Sometimes it will be other Sofipos or other banks or other institutions that are looking at different fraud schemes that we can prevent other institutions to take action before they actually happen.
Very, very good points there. Very good points. So, Tarek, how are you helping prepare your clients for these fraud schemes and emerging fraud schemes?
Well, it's all about the data. Whoever has the most data, it's the one that can verify it. And of course, not only by having data, but having it the most updated, right? Sometimes we have data, but it's just been so long that it's probably not even right. So that's part of it, having an updated database and the information as soon as possible. I also want to add a quick piggyback right from Javier's last point. Yeah, I definitely think authorities should help in different countries because, I mean, you can raise your hand, you can put it out in the communities, for prevention communities, and nothing ever happens like legally. So it's gonna keep happening. But yeah, but going back to the point, so we have to do this always as fast as possible, right? And always looking out for the latest technology on the connection, the fastest. Like we know fraud it's being done right now. You have to prevent it yesterday, not today. And sometimes we forget to just keep it simple. We want to look out for like really sophisticated softwares or solutions, and sometimes we can reduce the cost with something more like simple. Don't get me wrong, we love also machine learning, we love everything of that type because again, it makes us go faster, right?
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so just a reminder, if you have a question for our panel, hit the Q&A button. You can ask a question in English or Spanish. If you're more comfortable asking in Spanish, that's fine. It will be answered in English, but feel free to put that in the Q&A button. Let's talk about multi-factor authentication, the power of phone numbers, which is one of the titles of this, subtitle of this webinar. What are the strengths and weaknesses of multi-factor authentication? And maybe you can talk about whether or not you're using it. Sahari, let's go back to you.
Yes, well, multi-factor authentication is absolutely something that gives us a big pro in terms of the confidence of using the services, the platform that we have. And I think that it is something that helps us to identify, or the purpose is to be sure that the person or the user is the actual person that they say to be. So in this way, I think that this is an important tool to make some secure environment on all these transactions. And well, we are talking about financial transactions where all the people, we can feel like nervous about making something sure, because it is our money, our resources, our information over there. However, we know that this is sometimes very, it causes so much friction. So the idea, or the way that we, the spirit that we plan to use it in Quesky, or that we want to use it in Quesky, is to make it in a smart way, such that we can use it only if it is needed. Only if, well, sometimes it is like the first time and we need to gather all the information, but the idea, or the objective that we have permanently to iterating on, is to use in high-risk cases, or when a typical behavior is observed. So in our case, well, in Quesky, as I was saying before, we have our process is digital. So the phone is like one of the main tools. I don't know, if I leave my house and I forget my phone, I come back to get it. And I think that many people may feel like that, because we really have all that information here. So it is very common and very clear that it is connected, and is a personal device that can offer so much info by itself and can make the process very easy. But well, again, this authentication is important, is useful when we have everything verified. But one of the challenges that we sometimes have is how we can confirm, or that we need to confirm, that information and that device and that all the information that we use to authenticate really belongs to the actual person that it is saying to do. So if it works well and we ensure that everything flows very well, also, well, we know we have some challenges when there are some changes in phone, or in some kind of information. But in general, I think that it has opened the doors to very good experiences by making it easier, mainly when we have also including some biometrics elements that in this kind of authentication. So summarizing, it is a powerful tool. We need to use it in a smart way, such that it can really be as strong as possible to confirm that the user is the one that it is to do for the benefit of the user, the real user, the company, and not for the fraudsters. And yeah, I think that it will continue evolving on all these biometrics things, and well, we need to evolve with that, taking that advantage as well, because it can offer a good experience with the good points that could be stated at.
Right. Yeah, Javier, how are you using multi-factor authentication and phone numbers at Kubo?
Well, we have a second factor authentication both for our app and for our website. While implementing second factor authentication, we arrived to a lot of learnings in terms of what is the consequences of the implementation of this kind of tools in the user experience. And when you decide to implement, we implemented second factor authentication. Well, we already have tens of thousands of users, right? And
right.
And this is a key learning when you start requiring these kind of models. What are the use cases and what are the segments of your customers that probably you're neglecting, or you don't give them a second option for authentication? Or in Mexico, as you probably know, we have a very high rate of mobile phone being stolen, right? I mean, people get mocked every other day in public transport or in a restaurant or in their homes. And so we have a constant flow of customers that need to change their phone number and their device. And how do you tackle these weak spots of the user experience so that they are not a use case for fraudsters, right? To change phone numbers or to change phone numbers and get both the passwords of the user and also their second factor, right? And customers that are less tech savvy and don't understand what the process to change a phone number or the process to uninstall an app and install it in another phone, and how does that work. It's very important for us to not only implement these technological tools that when you see it in a design, or in a Figma with the screens and everything, they look beautiful and they're 100% bulletproof. And then you go to the reality of the user and you have these use cases that no one thought about them, right? So both the digital safety team, the product team, and the user experience team, the representatives for customer support, need to be very well connected while implementing these technological tools. That has been our learning in Kubo, and we have successfully implemented them.
Really interesting. That's really interesting. Tarek, what do you have to add there when all the companies that you're dealing with today and their use of multi-factor authentication?
Well, there are several types of MFA, multi-factor authentication. Obviously, the most common is SMS. A lot of companies are betting now for multi-channel authentication, just not SMS, but also email, or maybe even doing it on the back end through the carrier, which is also really interesting. There is the customer doesn't see it, just put down their phone number and it gets verified with the help of the carrier, of course, but it gets verified, and then it's linked to the phone, to the device, because sometimes we always confuse like the phone number with the device and the behavior of this. But I think it's really helpful, and it's gonna stay for longer. this part of OTPs.
Okay. Okay. So I want to get into a real life example now, and I want to ask both Javier and Sahari about the user journey when you have a new user coming onto your platform. I would like you to sort of talk about the user journey, and at the same time, talk about how you're balancing the friction that you need to implement for fraud prevention and maintaining a good user experience. And Javier, why don't I start with you this time and just take us through a new user experience?
Sure. So when people are interested in our app or in our products, that being a personal loan or a fixed term deposit, they'll start their journey by downloading our app, right? In any of the app stores, they will create first a user through their email and mobile phone. Then they will provide personal information. Most of the information that we require in the journey is required by the CNBB, which is the authority that not only we are registered at, but we are supervised by them. So there are certain pieces of information and fields that need to be filled out because they are required by regulation. Then we'll go to ID verification, and users will take a selfie so that we can do a live match of their user ID and their actual face. And then we'll go through a questionnaire for money laundering prevention, right? And after submitting all this information through our systems and fraud prevention machine learning models, we will assign them an account, right? And this account is basically a savings account that they can use with a small yield, and they can transfer cash in money, cash out money, request a debit card, and from there they can start getting value out of our fixed term deposits, for example, or with an empty savings account, get a personal loan and start using that money through an ATM, cashing out through an ATM or a transfer as pay, right? It all seems very simple, right? The journey is well defined, and each one of these stages should work seamlessly. But then you have all of these frictions that are created by requesting them additional information, a picture of their ID, for back and forth, their selfie, all their information. We measure how they are advancing in the journey, right? How fast are they typing, if they correct information, and all this affects user experience in the end. But what we have found at the same time is that you don't want to get the user to perceive you as too good to be true, right?
Right.
Wow, this was very simple. Email, mobile, and they gave me money. Well, that is too good to be true. And unfortunately, down here in Mexico, there have been several apps, companies that are fraudsters that are making these journeys so simple for the user that they can't believe it, and they fall into these schemes where they then try to get money out of people that are requesting a credit. So it is a balance of how can you make a user experience that is simple, that is clear, and that creates confidence or trust in your company and in your app in that sense. But at the same time, it's not too good to be true, because then the user starts getting suspicious, right? We have people that for example, do the onboarding in Cubo. Unfortunately, due to their credit quality and credit score, we cannot serve them in the personal loan product. And then they start questioning, well, I gave you all my information. They start getting suspicious, right? Maybe they will use their information. They were never going to give me money, right? And this is where the brand building of our product really needs to help us to create that trust, right? And this is where most of our equity building work comes into place, right?
Yeah.
That's basically our onboarding, the description of the journey, and also the delicate balance between making it very simple, very emphatic. I don't know if it translates like that, but at the same time, making sure that each one of the regulatory requirements and the fraud prevention schemes or models that we have are in place so that we can better serve a real user, right?
Right. No, that's a really good point. I like the fact that, you know, it's like you want to put some friction in there because otherwise people might think it's too good to be true, and that could actually cause drop off in and of itself. So, Sahari, I know you've got 2 products at Quesky, and it's going to be a little bit different for each one. But can you take us through the similar journey and where you're kind of putting in the friction needed for fraud prevention?
Yes, sure. I will explain, like, as you say, the general one. And first, I will explain you how the customer lives it. And later, I will explain what we are doing behind. So for the customers, it is something very easy. There are 5 steps. So he starts right to the landing page, well, the home, the website of our product, and he creates the users only with an email account and a password, and maybe a CAPTCHA is over there just to confirm that it is not a bot. So given that information, we pass to the next step, that is getting basic personal information, and I am talking about name, birthday, address, gender, and this information actually used to get the what we call in Mexico CORP, that is like the ID that the Mexican institution has to identify that the people. So we check, we get that along with the phone number. We request to verify the phone number. That is like the 3rd step, the phone number verification, because a token, an SMS, or, well, as Tarek was saying, we are using multi-channel in different email, SMS, or even WhatsApp. The customer receives the PIN, the personal number, and with that information, actually, they are approving to make some verifications in some data sources as Credit Bureau or Circular Credit. So it is run the risk assessment. The customer only sees something that is working over there, the assessment is running, and if it comes approved, we have the identity verification process where the selfie and the picture of the ID is taken, and that's all. If it is approved, then it follows. It depends on the money disbursed. Select all the features about payment date or the account where the customer wants to get the money, and so on, depending on the product. But behind these 5 steps that I have described, the idea is that we require the least information as possible to the user. And in the behind, we are looking, or we are getting all the information to get the useful information, either to validate, because the customer have some mistake and the email doesn't exist because it is a typo. So we are checking that everything is fine because of that kind of mistakes. Or if the email has some bad reports or bad information, or even bad records inside in Quesky. We are given that the personal information regarding the 2nd step, the personal information is provided, well, we get all this data, we formulate like an initial curve, because it is some number that, or some ID that not always is on top of mind of all of us. So we help the customer with that curve building. And also we check it with the government institution that has that information, in order to check that it actually exists and it is a legal person and it's a live person and so on. The phone number, we check the phone number, so we are ensuring that we have the right information to make contact, but also reading or getting all that data that can be also relevant in terms of, well, once that we have that approved, we can get all the other data that give us about where the customer is making the process, the geolocation, the IP, the device information, the email information. Well, email was in the first step, but the phone information. Also, we analyze, or we gather all the behavior that so far the customer has performed in the interaction with the platform. We read prior records, we review if there are some connections with the personal information, all the data that we have, and all of that information is provided, or is an input for the machine learning models. We have fraud, risk, credit capacity models to review, credit policies, hard rules, such that it is combined in a second, and we determine if that customer can be approved given this strategy that combines all these different elements. So at the end, given that we understand that there is some sensitive information that maybe the customer is not willing to provide at first, like the ID picture or the selfie, that steps that make us more friction are in the latter, or at the end of the funnel, such that the customer that already is engaged, that already knows that will receive some product or some loan or whatever that he's asking, then that user is more willing to provide this additional information, like the selfie, the ID, the picture of their ID, and also the information of their debit account, because in personal loans we disburse that money in the debit account. So that sensitive and more friction information is put at the end. So as a summary, the idea is to make all the great effort behind, get the useful information as possible, not provided by the user, but getting from other sources that are regulated and are fair, and such that we can get a great experience for the users. And for that user only are 5 simple steps, but in a way that we consider, or we find that is more friendly, or more that the user will be willing to provide because of the advance of the responses that he has gotten. Also, it will help us with some other situations like cost, because some products may be very expensive, and that is also important to think. But at first, well, we are like the main topics, or the main criteria is to ensure this good experience, something fast, and only the basic data. We are making all the time challenging ourselves in order to reduce the kind of information that we are asking, and the process how it's running, such that the experience can be the best as possible.
Well, thank you. That was a detailed explanation. I appreciate that. Tarek, I don't want you to critique these two, the different user journeys that they've just described, but maybe you could touch on best practices that haven't been mentioned, or what can you share about how sort of the totality of the industry is onboarding new customers? Are there other best practices there?
Sure. I came up with let's say a top 5 things not to do on your user experience.
Okay.
So you can translate that in what to do. So I think the first one would be, the less manual process you have, the better. And of course, that's going to reduce the cost every time. Also, another thing to reduce the cost is the order of which you put those funnels in your funnel, how you put your tools. And then you have to ask yourself, am I using too many tools or not? So yeah, that sometimes you can reduce costs by using less tools, but still, That's a great example. That's how I said, like, she's like, I'm not gonna ask more information until you need something else, then maybe I'll ask for it later. So that's great. And then I think the most important one is not to work just like fraud prevention. Like you need to work with all of the other areas, right? You need a staff stretch. You need to work with people from onboarding. You need to work with people from the back, and you need to work with people from product. You need to work with a lot of other people to make this really work like the best cost, and to make it easy for the user, right? That's part of it.
Yeah.
And then another thing is the visibility we have on this, right? The more we share internally within the companies, the better, and the faster we get through this. Sometimes it's hard because, I don't know, some area wants just to have a certain process, but maybe another area can use that part of the process later on for a risk assessment on the credit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So that's like my top 5.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about false positives, where you're really, might be, for whatever reason, someone's flagged as potentially being fraudulent, but they're not. They're a good user. Maybe they had trouble with their selfie or whatever. How are you dealing with that, Javier?
Yeah, I think there are 3 key ways to deal with false positives. The first one is to have a very clear and open communication with your customers, right? You need to let them know what's going on with their credit application, or they're setting up an account to invest, for example, or to save with you, and getting to hear from them that they're having this issue, and letting them know what the issue is the first part. The second one is, how do you review your policies and thresholds, right? Sometimes the threshold on what is the minimum level of certainty for an ID that you can accept, maybe too high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you won't let anybody, everybody in, but you can maybe lower those thresholds of certainty, so that you don't let people out of the loop of the onboarding, right? And the third one is to always to have continuous monitoring, because these things are very dynamic. From 1 month to the next, you'll get different false positives, or you will get rejection rates that are increasing dramatically. And sometimes, if you don't have continuous monitoring, you will start hurting the customer acquisition channel.
That's a good point. Good point. Sahari, false positives, how are you dealing with them?
Yeah, well, I can see that we have 2 ways. One that is like analytical in a massive way, and the other is case by case. So in the analytical way, we keep control groups. Control groups are like a small proportion of users that are selected randomly, and that they skip some of the policies or models or criteria, such that we can have some statistical analysis on that information about they are performing. This control group, well, in this case, help us with those customers that we rejected, and we find out, once that we have all the performance, if they really are behaving bad or not. So we have directly that information. And we also keep tracking that performance, and that is also helpful to continue improving and feeding and training the models and the policies that we have in place. And in the other hand, in the case study, we have manual reviews. These manual reviews are for all the users. So in this case, we are also analyzing the rejected users. So we can identify, determine in this case-by-case example, all the information that maybe a model or the parameters that we have in place are not able to see, and we define manually from some fraud investigation experts if it is the case that it is or not a fraud case. We know that a person may not be perfect, so sometimes we also make double or triple checks depending on the case, such that we can have a more clear identification of this. In addition, we are sometimes reviewing or very attempt to what Tarek was recommending. Internally, we have information or some reports from operations, from collections, from compliance, for complaints. So that info is useful to define these samples that sometimes are randomly selected, the ones that will be reviewed, and other times are specifically given the main areas of improvement that we identify.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're coming up towards the end of the hour. If you have a question for our panelists, now is the time. Hit the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. You can ask a question in English or in Spanish. Tarek, when you're onboarding a new client, like what's involved there? And are you coming in? Are you replacing an existing system that someone might have for fraud prevention or ID verification, or are you coming in and adding? What's all that like?
That's a great question. We are another layer on the stack. Right now, at the moment, I can say this naturally in the whole Latin region, we are helping out there to analyze the information of the customer to give a score on the behavior of their information, not to verify, how to put this. Sometimes we just want to go directly like, where is the device? Of course, we have to do some stuff because of the regulations, right? But like, is it on? Where is it? How many times did they type their password? All that type of stuff. But sometimes if we take a step back and just analyze the information on this before going into other identity checks, it's going to be easier for everyone, right? You're going to cut down on cost. Maybe you won't send it to Face ID. You already know that phone number doesn't exist, or that email has been taking part in another fraud event. Sometimes the physical IDs might match, sometimes they might not, right? But sometimes this part of Face ID and it matches with a different phone number or a different name. And then you check that phone number, it's being under somebody else's name. So it makes some kind of noise. That's where we come in, like, it's just another layer on the stack.
Right. Got it. Okay, I want to talk about the future here and sort of the way that the sort of the battle between the fraudsters and people like you, how you sort of view it. I mean, this is, I presume that this is a battle that is never going to be over, right? There's always going to be new things. How are you staying on top of the new developments? So Harry, start with you.
Well, I think that, yeah, it is a, in my perspective, it will be a battle that will keep ongoing. So it is part of the business, actually. And well, the technology is evolving in order to have more information and also to identify people and so on. But also that technology is available for both sides, right? So that's why it will be a battle that we will continue keeping. But well, it's something that is not going to disappear, but is something that we need to identify how to manage, really, and to be and to evolve in a fast pace, or at least as fast as possible, in order to don't be in the past, because it is I have seen, and maybe since COVID I have seen that it has evolved so fast. So yeah, it will continue from my perspective.
Yeah. I think that's I think you're right there. So we have a question coming in here, two questions actually. What emerging technologies can help in fraud prevention? That's question number one. Question number two is, how are privacy and data security regulations evolving? So who wants to tackle one of those?
I'll take one.
Sorry?
I'll take one.
Okay.
So the privacy and data security regulations, I think they're evolving way too fast. Sometimes it's out there in the open, and sometimes it's not official. And then when it comes to official, there is information being removed, and then whoever gets the data, it's the master of the place, I guess. So yeah, sometimes government don't help a lot. Sometimes government make a business out of it. Sometimes government just want to keep it like, no, we're not gonna hand out information. We could verify it, yeah, but we're not gonna hand it out. We want to protect our citizens.
Mhm.
And then for the first question, what emerging technologies can help in fraud prevention? Well, at the moment, we saw like Face ID coming in like in the past, I don't know, 8 years. It was really emerging. And going back to the subject we were talking before, you cover one type of fraud, and then they come up with a new way to go through it, right? I'm sorry, to verification. So nowadays, we're seeing people jumping over Face ID. They found a way. They always find a way to go through that emerging technology, to that new verifying process. And the question of the last 2 years, I guess, is going passwordless.
Mm.
That's gonna, I think it's gonna stay for a while. I could say it's an emerging technology, but we're not quite there yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Javier, why don't you? How are you trying to stay on top of this battle and the you know the challenges of future kind of threats?
I think it's an exciting time, Peter. There are, I mean, there are opportunities for entrepreneurs, to use the technology, not to jump on the bandwagon of AI, but AI will definitely be a tool that will help us dramatically to increase the accuracy of our fraud prevention technologies. It's just amazing what AI can do in these specific applications. And how do you keep up with all of this? Well, being very connected with organizations such as Fintech Nexus, for example, attending the seminars, the events that these kind of associations and industry events hold, because that's where you start hearing about, best practices. That's where startups and established companies bring their new tools to help us as financial institutions to bring more value to our real customers. And that's the bottom line for me. I mean, as we become more effective in preventing fraud, we are able to, lower our interest rates for real customers, to approve more customers, and to bring more value to people that are, in need of our products and services. So I think that's something that we'll continue to do. And I think we haven't even scratched the surface of AI to, moving in and creating new startups and entrepreneurs that will have AI as a tool and discover specific applications on fraud prevention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we got time for one last audience question before we sign off. How do you capture fraud schemes that are behavior related and not users' data?
Well,
Well,
in our case, I'm sorry, go on.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead. I had the last one. You go ahead.
Okay. No, in our case, building the data to be able to spot behavioral nuances and changes it's a lot of work, and it's resource demanding, right? Because you have so many touch points of your users, and how do you build the data, the big data databases, so that you can spot differences in behavior is probably the hardest part to do. But there are ways, and there are models, and there are processes that you can implement so that these behavioral changes will will help you spot fraud or identity theft. There are very simple ones like event count. These users are using their debit card twice a week, and suddenly they are using it 14 times in a 10-minute window. There are very simple principles, and all the way to machine learning principles that you can use to spot these behavioral changes.
Okay, well, that is all we have time for. Really appreciate it, Javier, Sahari, and Tarek. Really appreciate your thoughts here. Thank you, of course, for the audience for watching and tuning in. Appreciate that. And of course, thank you to Telesign for sponsoring this webinar. I learned a lot. I really enjoyed it. And let's have a great afternoon, everybody. Thanks a lot. See ya.
Thank you, everyone, for your time.
Yep. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.